Hey guys, and welcome back to our third in-class demo video lecture series, whatever you want to call it. We're going to work on number 5. Okay, so number 5 gives us the Jordan Corporation income statement. We see it here on the screen. I just plugged everything in. They tell us that the projected sales are expected to grow at 15%. So I put my 0.15% right there, or 1.15% right there. And what we need to do is prepare a pro forma income statement, assuming that costs vary with sales and the dividend payout ratio is constant. So they don't give us the dividend payout ratio, right? They don't. So we need to figure that out. And it's very, very easy to figure that out. So to figure out the dividend payout ratio, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my dividends that are currently being paid, and I'm going to divide that by my net income. Okay? They tell us it's constant, so it doesn't matter if we do it before, well, obviously we have to do it before the increase in sales to figure out what is that rate, right? So if I take my dividends, which the problem tells us are $1,500, and I take my net income, I divide those two. Nope. I get a dividend payout ratio of 22%. So now, since I know the dividend payout ratio, I'm going to make that yellow so I know what it is. I can go ahead and create my pro forma financial statement. So I'm just going to come over to the right here, and I'm just going to multiply everything, right? So my revenue was $42,000. Well, with the increase of 15%, my revenue is going to be $48,300. My costs, I'm going to do the same thing. Costs were $33,000. I'm going to multiply it by my 15% increase. I get $37,950. My taxable income, revenue minus costs, $10,350. I need to figure out what the tax is. Well, in this problem, they tell us that the tax is 21%. Okay, so this is from the previous problem. I want to change it, say 21%. So my net income now, or I'm sorry, my tax amount is my taxable income times my 0.21, which problem tells us. I'm going to get rid of those cents. Okay, I got 2174. So that means my net income now is $8,176. Cool. Now I can figure out my dividends, right? How do I do that? Well, I already figured out my dividend payout ratio is 22%. So I'm going to take my net income of $81.76 times my 0.22, which is my dividend payout ratio. Again, I want to get rid of those cents, clean it up a little bit. So I have dividends of $17.99. So I need to figure out now what is my additions to my retained earnings, right? So very easy to do. I take my net income minus my dividends, and I get $63.78. And that is my, that's how I get my additions to retained earnings. That's how I get my dividends right there. Again, all I did was take my net income, multiply it by my dividend payout ratio, and we're good to go. So that's really all we needed to do for number 5. Now, number 6 is a little interesting, right? Because they don't give us any balance sheets or any income statements, right? So they tell us that Hotchkiss Manufacturing is currently operating at only 78% of its fixed asset capacity. Okay? Current sales are $640,000. How fast can sales grow before any new fixed assets are needed? So basically what we're trying to figure out in number 6 is how can we grow our assets before or how much can we increase our sales by before we start needing new assets? Because our current assets are only operating at 78%, okay? So the first thing we need to do is to calculate the ROA. We need to figure out what the plowback method is, and then we can figure out what the internal growth rate is. Okay, so that's what they're asking. Yeah, so that's what they're really asking us to do. So if we think about it, we know the ROA is pretty much given to us. Okay. It's that 8%, okay? So what we need to do then is to just simply figure out sorry, pump the brakes here. I'm getting confused as I'm reading these problems. So Hotchkiss, yeah, they want to figure out what is our capacity. We need to figure out full capacity, okay? So for this one, what is full capacity, right? We know that our sales currently are $640,000. That's at operating our fixed assets at 0.78 or 78%, okay? So what we need to do is to figure out what our calculation is. Well, the full capacity calculation is current sales divided by our percent of fixed asset capacity. Okay, so we already know what our current sales are. We already know what our current sales are. We already know what our fixed asset capacity is. We divide the two. Let me get rid of my decimal places. So basically what we're saying here is sales can grow to $820,513 before we need any more fixed assets, right? So basically, how much can sales grow by? Well, if we subtract the two, we say that sales can basically grow by another $180,513 before we need to start buying some more fixed assets. Okay, so that was number 6. Okay, let's jump into number 7 because that was a pretty quick one. So let's look at number 7. Number 7 says A7X company has an ROA of 8%. They have a payout ratio of 31%. What's the internal growth rate? Guess what? literally, this is the easiest problem because all we need to recall is what is our internal growth rate calculation. Well, that's easy. It's ROA times my plowback divided by 1 minus ROA times the plowback. Okay? We already have the numbers that we need, right? So my ROA is 0.08 times, what's my plowback, or the plowback method? Or I'm sorry, the plowback ratio, it's 1 minus the payout ratio. So the payout ratio is 31%. 1 minus 31% gives me 0.69. The top half of this equation is 0.0552. Guess what? I can do the bottom part of the equation very simply by saying 1 minus my numerator. I got 0.9448. So what then is my internal growth rate? Well, just divide these two. Oh, wrong way. And I say my internal growth rate, or IGR, is 5.84. Okay. You know what? Let's just plow through number 8. It's not really that difficult. They give us enough information here to figure out what the sustainable growth rate is. So the first thing we need to do is recognize, I'm going to come down here. First thing we need to recognize is what is the calculation for the sustainable growth rate? Well, that's easy. It is ROE times the plowback divided by, you guessed it, 1 minus ROE times the plowback. ROE times the plowback. Okay? Now, what information do we have here? Well, they give us the profit margin, they give the asset turnover, they give us the debt to equity ratio, and they give us the payout ratio, right? Okay, that's pretty easy. So the first thing that we need to do is calculate the debt to equity ratio, okay? Because if you look at this, or the information that we have, you should be thinking, okay, I got profit margin. I remember that as part of the DuPont method to figure out what ROE is. I got the asset turnover, okay? I don't have the equity multiplier, but I got the total debt ratio. So I can probably figure out what my equity multiplier is, okay? So when we see ROE, we got to think DuPont, right? Profit margin times total asset turnover times equity multiplier. Okay, well, I have my profit margin, right? That's going to come down here. ROE equals 0.058 times my total asset turnover of 1.3 times my equity multiplier. I got to figure out what my equity multiplier is, right? Well, I can do that, again, because they give us the debt ratio, right? So they tell us that the debt ratio is 0.39. Okay, cool. So think about it. What is the total debt ratio? Well, we can look at it this way and say total debt divided by total assets equals 0.39. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is take this equation, okay, and we need to kind of invert it, okay? So what we're going to do to invert it, we're going to say, okay, not a problem. We're going to start off with TA divided by total debt. We can invert this and say, well, it's 1 plus our total equity divided by our total debt. Okay, cool. All right, we're chugging along here, okay? So we can take that and then kind of reorganize things, so to speak, okay? So we're going to start off and say, okay, 1 over 0.39 equals my total assets over my total debt, right? But I need to recognize that I can't use total assets divided by total debt. I got to take that that 1 plus the total equity divided by the debt. So we're subbing, right? So I'm going to say I already did that, equals 1 plus total equity divided by my debt. Okay, so we're just subbing in the second line here. Okay, so if we subtract 1 from both sides, we end up getting the DE equals 1 over 1 divided by 0.39, close parentheses, minus 1. Close. Okay? So basically, we run the numbers, we end up getting 0.64. Okay? So now we can go back to the equity multiplier, or I'm sorry, the DuPont method, and we could say, okay, ROE equals 0.058, which is my PM multiplier, times 1.3, which is my total asset turnover, times, well, 1 plus 0.64. I run the numbers, I end up getting 0.1236, or %12.36%. Okay? So guess what? Now I need to figure out, okay, what is my retention ratio, or what's that plowback, right? Well, that's easy. To figure out what B is, I just take 1 minus the dividend payout ratio. So B, find it, B equals 1 minus 0.4, or 0.40, that's given in the problem. .6. So now I can go ahead into my sustainability equation, or sustainable growth rate, since I calculated the ROE, since I calculated the plowback method, I can go ahead and calculate what is my sustainable growth rate, right? So here's what I'm going to do. The ROE times my dividend payout ratio ends up being point. We've got in a couple decimal places. 0.074. And then the denominator for the sustainability equation is 1 minus the product of ROE times B. I get 0.92. And the sustainable growth rate is 0.0801. And that's a sustainable growth rate. So that's how you figure out number 8. Like I said, number 9 is just kind of rehashing out everything else, so don't worry about that. If you have any questions, just text me, let me know. Be more than happy to go over it with you. So there you go. So the videos are up. I will work on making that exam, and we will be good to go for Monday. So they're up a day early. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you, and have a great day.